Cheers. Have you ever felt like you couldn't control your body, even for just a little moment? Well, that's the reality for everyday people with Tourette syndrome. Hello everyone, my name is Miki and today I'll be talking to you about Tourette syndrome, or TS for short, and the stigma that's attached to it. I was diagnosed with TS a few years back, and I feel like not enough public attention is raised for the people to know about this disorder. And I feel like I should probably start off by saying that Tourette syndrome is relatively common and is on the rise amongst children. Raising public awareness and understanding of Tourette syndrome is very important to reduce the current misconceptions and the stigma that individuals with Tourette syndrome face every day. So, what is Tourette syndrome? Well, it's a neurological disorder characterized by involuntary and repetitive movements or vocalizations, also known as tics. According to the Mayo Clinic, these tics can simply be as something like an eye blink or a head jerk, or even a throat clearing, but it can be so much more complex, such as repeating words, yelling, or using offensive language. Yes, it's true. But it's also important to remember and note that coprolalia, I think that's how you say it, or involuntary swearing is a very rare type of tic, but often is misrepresented on social media and television. So, what are some symptoms of Tourette syndrome? Well, it usually starts appearing between the ages of 5 and 9. Boys are 3 out of 4 times more likely to get it than girls, and the exact cause of TS is not fully known or understood, but it's suspected that a combination of hormonal, genetics, and environmental factors, and even sometimes abnormalities in certain brain regions. Basically, the brain of people with Tourette syndrome is slightly built differently. I'm literally built different. So now, let's get to the stigma that I'm very eager to tell you about. So the stigma is one of the biggest challenges that people with Tourette's can face. Many people who are not very familiar with TS think that tics are voluntary movements or attention-seeking behavior. Often with people with TS are often labeled as rude or disruptive, especially in places like work or school environments. This can lead to discrimination and even social rejection. And don't forget bullying. Furthermore, the social media frequently exaggerates Tourette syndrome by focusing on the rarest and most extreme symptoms, like coprolalia, which influences a wrong perception. Even in some cultures, people with TS are isolated from society, and neurological disabilities like TS have a heavy stigma attached to it. Due to many various myths or spiritual beliefs, in extreme cases, the stigma can lead to punishment of people with TS and other neurological disorders. So how do we prevent the stigma? Well, children and people with TS need to seek appropriate help when needed, like therapy. Advocating people with TS means, compassionate and understanding, building open communication with teachers, peers, and family members to reduce misconceptions around TS. Schools should be able to provide accommodations such as an IEP, individualized education plans, which I have gotten at Elsie, and I've had a great time with it. I'm very grateful for it. So the first time I've heard about TS, it's when I got diagnosed like 3 years back. And ever since I was like 5 years old, from the time I've had always experienced involuntary movements. I've never paid much attention to it, and my family always thought these movements were due to my playful behavior, since I was just a kid. Then, on January 7th, 2022, I've had a stroke, and at that time the doctors in the hospital explained to me that my weird movements were actually tics that were caused by Tourette syndrome. Learning about Tourette syndrome helped me immensely to understand that this was not some scary thing that they make it sound. In fact, the doctors said Tourette syndrome for the first time. I thought they were referring to Tourettes, as in the ones that shoot cannonballs. Don't question it, I was just 12. But I've learned that Tourette syndrome is not a mental illness, but a neurological disorder that is caused by an imbalance of the brain's electricity The neurons in the brain that send signals via electrons to the other neurons form an electrical current in the brain. And when some of these electrons and neurons misfire, they send the wrong signals to the center of the brain, which is responsible for movement, which then causes an involuntary movement or a sound, also known as a tic. Throughout my life, I faced lots of long looks, rude comments, and even public shaming because of my tics. People moved their children away from me, thinking something was wrong with me, and I've even been yelled at in public because of my tics. These experiences were quite hurtful, but they also motivated me to raise the awareness like I'm doing now, and educate others about TS. My tics are way less active now. They were most frequent while I attended elementary school. Ever since I entered high school, they almost evaporated, which shows how the brain can change over time. And usually most individuals with Tourette syndrome, by the time they're 18, it usually goes away. And of course, for some people, it sticks around. Now, Tourette syndrome is more than just a medical condition. It's a misunderstood part of many people's lives, and it's up to us to educate ourselves and others, and it's up to us to challenge the stereotypes and stigma attached. And it's not just to raise awareness, it's also to build a culture of empathy and understanding for all individuals with conditions and disabilities that are invisible, such as TS. Now, let's start changing the world together, as we can make our world a more accepting and compassionate place. Thank you very much for listening to my TED Talk. Wow, mint tea is so good.